Welcome back, everybody. Hot mic off and rolling here on a Tuesday morning. Adam Jacobson, UND Hoops, will join us about a half hour. Here it is. It's the 19th day of May. You see outside, it was chilly at the bus stop this morning, I can tell you that. But the calendar says we're supposed to be playing the EDC baseball tournament today. Mother Nature may have another say in that. Our next guest can give us a clue. His team has finished third in the regular season at EDC baseball. Great to have longtime head coach Brett Peterson from West Fargo join us here on a Tuesday morning and get us going. Are we playing ball today or what? What's an update?
You know, as of right now, we are. Like I said, I know they're checking field conditions. They have to play all 4 games, and being at 4 different sites, they have to make sure all the fields are ready to go. So I have a feeling we'll find out one way or the other around noon. But as of right now, we're playing and just kind of waiting on field conditions and probably temperatures to some degree, too.
That last part just makes me shake my head on temperatures. But you and I have done the old start the season later bit. I'm not going to waste time with it now. But tell me about just, hey, we're hoping to play. Just what's the waiting game like for you as a head coach, and then trying to tell your team either we're going today or not?
Yeah, you know, the nice thing about starting on Tuesday, I guess, is if we do have to postpone it into tomorrow, it doesn't really change anything scheduling wise, pitching wise, anything like that. Yeah. So I think it's probably for us, it's a little more anxiety as coaches than it is the players. They're ready to go whenever it is. So, you know, it doesn't change anything how we approach a game plan or how we're going to, you know, attack the game. So it's just we'll find out when we go. If it's today, we're ready. And if it's tomorrow, we'll be ready tomorrow as well.
See, that kind of mindset for the players is probably great because this is the biggest week. You got to somehow win 2 games, Brett, to keep your season going.
Yeah, and I tell you what, the East this year, you look at 1 through 8, and I know we've said it in the past, but it's probably never been more true that you could take any 4 of those teams, and if you told me they're going to state next weekend, I wouldn't be surprised. It's going to be a very competitive weekend, a lot of good teams, a lot of good players, a lot of really good starting pitching that you'll see throughout the course of the tournament. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough tournament for any team to get 2 wins out of to get to next weekend.
In fact, you get Davies right off the hop. Tell us about this matchup. If it's today, it's tomorrow. What kind of challenge does Davies present to you guys?
Davies they're a well coached. They're a good team. They, like I said, when you talk starting pitching, you know, no matter who they throw at us, it's going to be a tough task for our hitters. They swing the bats really well. You know, we're pretty familiar with each other. We saw each other in EDC last year, and we've seen each other quite a bit over the years. So you always know you're going to get a really good game from them. They're going to come ready to go, and we're going to have to come with our A game if we're going to come out on top.
Tell us about the 2026 Packers. Is this what you thought for this year? Underachieve, overachieve? How would you describe your team this season?
You know, I think from us as a coaching staff, this is kind of what we had thought. I think going into the year, we thought, hey, we have a good chance to take a top 4 seed into the EDC tournament. You know, about 3 weeks ago, we were sitting 5-5 in the conference, and but we didn't feel like we were far away. You know, we saw some things, you know, in all aspects of the game. We were starting to swing it a little bit. You know, pitchers were really starting to kind of do the things that we thought they were going to do. And from a conference standpoint, we went on a 9-1 run, you know, to grab this 3 seed. So we're really hitting the ball well. I think that's maybe exceeded our expectations a little bit, is how well we've been hitting the ball. You know, I think we kind of knew what we were going to get from a few of our guys on the mound, and I thought would be pretty good defensively, which we have been, but offensively maybe a little bit of a surprise, and that's just the part of the game that we really got to keep going the next 2 weekends to have some success.
Yeah, I'm looking here at your recent stretch here, 17, 13 runs, 15, 17, 16. What is it about why the offense has clicked here over the last few weeks?
I think a lot of it's confidence, and a lot of it is just contributions from everybody in the lineup, right? It's not just like it's the top of the order, middle of the order. We're getting significant contributions up and down the lineup. I think what we've become is kind of a tough lineup to attack. There's really no one right now to pitch around. You know, we got a little bit of speed. We can do some things on the bases. If we have to play small ball, we feel pretty good about that. So it's just a lot of consistency up and down the lineup with just a lot of our guys that, you know, they say you want to be getting hot at the right time of the year, and right now that's kind of where we're at.
I got to ask, Brett, now with the advent of everything indoors in West Fargo, how much does that help for getting guys ready to hit? It's one thing to try and simulate it, another thing to be actually in the cage to be able to do that. How much does that change things out in West Fargo now?
You know, I can't even tell you how much it's changed things. Yeah. Just this year, you know, this is the first year, you know, we've had our indoor facilities. So, you know, like we told the guys, and even as a coaching staff, we talked normally a player's first live at bat comes in the first game of the year. Oftentimes it's down in Sioux Falls. Battle of the Dakotas is the first time we get on a field, right? So, but throughout the course of the winter and especially in batting practice, a lot of these guys had 30 to 40 at bats off of live pitchers before the season even started. And I really think that that's made a difference both at the beginning of the year and probably the way you've seen us swing the bats here the last couple of weeks. I just think it's such a repetition game. You want all those reps, and you can't get those reps in a lot of indoor places, in our climate in the wintertime, and our facility has allowed us to do that. So I think it has helped a lot with where we're at right now.
Say 10 years ago, Fargo and West Fargo didn't have anything indoors like this. Now both do. How much has that accelerated the level of player around here in your mind?
I think a lot. I think you always had teams from the South, is perceptive wise they have the advantage, right? Because they can play year round. We're kind of at that point where we can play year round. You can't go into any of these facilities and actually play a live game, but you can simulate now almost every part of the game. So I think in that regard, we've really been able to catch up to some of the schools and some of the teams that have the warmer climates where they can be outside. So yeah, I think you're right. Look at the last 10 years for us in West Fargo specifically, just this last year having the facility we have, we're not going to be as far behind, from here on out as teams and players that are able to play outside most of the year.
All right, you've been known to be around a pretty good pitcher or two during your time in the EDC. Right now, we got two high-end pitchers. What is that like to see these two guys, Caden Nelson at South and obviously Kason Barkard at Horace? Is this as good as you've ever seen it in terms of pitching in the EDC?
I think depth-wise, yeah. I think just the number of guys that can go out now. You see, when I first started, it was kind of, you were pretty happy and surprised to see a low 80s pitcher, right? 85 was, you just didn't see a lot of that. And now that has become kind of that upper 80s, 90s. And, the two guys that you just mentioned, we faced them both this year. And yeah, I mean, they are as tough as it gets as an opponent. And, you could throw 5-6 other names in there of guys with good velocity. And I think it is the deepest the EDC has ever been pitching wise. When you look at all the teams in the East that since I've been coaching, we've seen over the years a lot of good pitchers, but maybe not the depth that we have in the East right now.
When you're facing those guys, do you even talk to your team about what they're facing, or you want to get out of their heads because they already know what's coming is going to be difficult in its own right?
It's a little of each, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to be thinking too much, especially when you're facing that. And guys, you just don't see, like I said, you don't see a lot of upper 80s, 90-mile-an-hour fastballs. Not to mention, the off-speed pitches that both of those guys throw, right? So I think the goal is always to try to attack and get a fastball, get something early in the count that you can handle. It's pretty tough when you're sitting in an 0-2, 1-2 count and you have all their options coming at you. So I think it's kind of being aggressive early, getting on that pitch that you're able to handle. But yeah, you don't want to overthink it either and talk too much. It's still one of those games that you want to be reacting rather than thinking through those things.
So we got a guy going to Oregon. We got another guy going to Texas A&M. Drew Eric is not that long ago is pitching in the SEC. Just football gets a lot of the lion's share of the attention, Brett, but the level of baseball player the last 5 years is second to none around here. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like you just didn't, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you didn't see guys going to schools of that caliber. And I think that does speak a lot to North Dakota baseball, where we're at right now. I think, we're on the map a little bit. It just takes a few guys, right? And then all of a sudden people understand some of these programs, realize that there's some talent up here if you come looking for it. And yeah, it's good that those guys are, putting us on the map a little bit. And I expect this to be something that continues over the course of the years. When you look at all the youth baseball players and the facilities we have, I don't think this is something that's going to be a one-time occurrence or just a rare thing. I think this is going to be a year in, year out type deal.
When you mentioned the off speed, how big a deal is that? It's one thing to throw hard and throw 90 or 91, but to have a breaking pitch, a slider, how rare is that, or the fact that the kids are able to do it these days to make them that much better?
That's the game changer, I think, right? Because, like I said earlier, before you didn't have a lot of, 80 was kind of that benchmark 15, 20 years ago. And now that's the norm. So I mean, I think guys are getting accustomed to the velo, even middle to upper eights. But when you get a guy that can, especially a changeup, we've seen a couple of kids this year with changeups that, that I think that's when you look at all levels of baseball, all the way up to the majors, right? I mean, everybody's bullpen now has those 97, 98 mile an hour arms, but the guys that really can mix speeds, hitting spots is still important too. Guys that can work the corners, but that mixes speeds where you just don't know what's coming, and then to try to pick that up as a high school hitter,
Yeah.
that's where the game changer really. That's where these guys can be really, really tough when they mix that up along with a live arm.
Brett Peterson joining us, West Fargo Packer baseball head coach. Packers have Davies coming up today at 5. Everything then moves to Jack Williams. How neat is that for this year? You guys get to play there for the semifinals and the championship this weekend.
Yeah, no, it's always a fun place to play. I haven't been out there myself now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I hear that there's been some work done out there. So, it's always a great atmosphere to play in. I know people, fans and parents like to watch out there. So yeah, we have a lot of nice fields in the area now, and it's fun to jump around and play in all of them.
We were visiting off air. State next week is in Minot. I'm trying to remember the last time Minot hosted the State A baseball tournament. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, it has been a while. I couldn't tell you the exact year either. Like I was telling you earlier too, for a long time there, it bounced between Jamestown and Mandan.
Yeah.
That was the rotation that we went with forever, kind of centrally located. But as more programs have worked on their fields and built fields, we've had a chance to host it in West Fargo. Fargo's hosted it now, Dickinson. So I think every town kind of wants to get in on the mix and host it. So there's just a lot of really good fields in North Dakota. There's unique fields, and you get a different kind of atmosphere each time for the state tournament, which I think that's a little more fun than always having it the same venue. Is kind of having that different atmosphere. Every field has a different character, different things to it. So it's fun to bounce around to go to some of these different fields.
I have to ask you, as a diehard baseball fan, we were talking earlier, so the Twins game, got delayed for 2 hours last night in May. Would you stay in May, or would you stay in July? Or does it depend on who the team's playing? Like, what's the threshold for you to stay during a rain delay? Or would you just leave anyway?
Honestly, if I'm there, I'm staying. I think that they were talking. I think there might have been 100 people there by the end of last night. It was not very many. I was at a game against Cleveland a couple summers ago, and it was we ended up being in the ballpark for almost 8 hours, and I love it. When I was a kid, I was always hoping for extra innings just to stay as long as possible. Now, when the field conditions and weather conditions are like they were yesterday, it's a little bit more of a grind.
Yes.
It's easier to stay in a rain delay in the middle of August than it is probably in May.
Correct.
But I'm sticking around and watching the whole thing.
So, were you by yourself at the end of the 8 hours, or was somebody still with you when you were waiting it out?
There was more people than you would think. It wasn't like it was a delay in the middle. Once the game actually started, we played it out, but it was about a 3.5 hours. And then, you get there a little bit early as well.
Yep.
So, but it was kind of one of those where the way that the radar was looking, the way they were talking, it was going to happen. It was just not a matter of how long the delay was actually going to be.
That's the hardcore, man. You're diehard. If you're going to stay, we're here, right? We're not going to go.
Yeah.
Man. So you mentioned today at noon is probably the decision if you're going to go or not?
Yep, I think the fields are being looked at now, and I think they're also kind of monitoring the temperatures too. It's obviously going to be, a little warmer as the week goes on.
Yeah.
So I think that might play into the decision too. But like I said, right now we're approaching everything as a 5 o'clock start. So that's what we'll do until we hear otherwise.
Yeah, the wind yesterday. My son was supposed to have T-ball last night, and it ended up getting canceled, and rightfully so, because it ended up raining at 5:45 right when we were going to be out there. But that wind, that's the other part as well, Brad. If you're out there, it's one thing if it's raining. It's another thing that'll cut right through you out there.
Yeah, it's been a weird year because we haven't had a lot of games canceled due to weather, and we didn't have snow issues early, but it feels like almost every game we've played, it's been a 20 to 30 mile an hour wind, gusting up to 40. I mean, we've played with the wind blowing straight in where you can barely get a ball out of the infield, and a couple of times last week the wind was blowing straight out where it was just a launching pad. So we've kind of been through it all, but the wind has been the common theme. It's been very few nights where you look out and the flags aren't moving at all.
It's great to catch up, bud. Good luck tonight. Stay warm out there. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk soon, all right?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
There he goes, Brett Peterson, head coach of the West Fargo baseball team. Packers have Davies coming up tonight in the EDC quarterfinals. Everybody moves to Jack Williams Stadium for consolation semis and championship semis on Friday. And then the top 4 teams make it on to the state tournament, which you will see coming up next week, part of our extensive coverage of each of the state tournaments from Minot and Jamestown, along with Mandan and Grand Forks for soccer, tennis, Class A and B baseball, and Class A and B softball. We'll give you all the details on that as the week rolls on. Let's break. We come back. We'll wrap up our first hour. Second hour on deck with Adam Jacobson from UND Basketball. Hot Mic continues after this.